Hello, and welcome to another episode of Talk with Koiya. I am your host, Koiya, and as you know, this podcast is brought to you by Talk, Test, Treat. If you are living in the Central Florida area and need a testing location near you, visit www.talktestcfl.com. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. If you don't know, March 10th is National Women and Girls HIV and AIDS Awareness Day, and I have no other than Dr. Andrea Dunn here to talk all about it. Hey, girl.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Koiya?
I am awesome. So I'm sure you've watched the podcast by now, and you've saw that we start every episode with the card game.
Yes.
So I'm going to have you pull a card, read the card aloud, and then answer it for us.
All right.
So let's see what you get.
Ooh, let's go. Top 3 songs on your sex playlist.
I know I told you this would not be like Carisha Please, but I feel like we are starting off very much like Carisha Please.
Yeah,
but hey.
Yeah, I need a shot. I would have to say, I don't know. Well, I do have one, a playlist. The top 3 songs. This is challenging. I would say, I'm really, really obsessed with Chris Brown.
Oh,
Right.
okay. I like
Okay.
where this is going.
I'm really obsessed with Chris Brown. Even though it's not sensational, even though I love sensational right now, it's like the top song. But I would probably say his last album. I don't know if I could name all the songs though off the top of my head, but I know there are a lot on his last album.
That was a long one.
Was super long. But that's, if I had to pick an album, I'd have to pick the top 3 from his album.
Okay.
But I can't think of them off the top of my head. I don't know. I'm like, this is a good question. You got me sweating over here, girl.
Chris Brown is a good person to have on a sex playlist, so we'll go with that. Let's pull another card and see what you get.
Okay. Let's see. How often do you get tested for STIs? Every year. Every single year through my annual checkups. And I think it's important to make sure that we do that, even though I feel like as a woman, depending on if you have the right provider, that is something you may have to advocate for because they may not always be interested in doing it if you have no symptoms. But I think it's important to do it at least once a year.
Yeah, I think it should be a part of every woman's routine to make sure that that's done once a year. And depending on your lifestyle, maybe even more, you know? So I love that you could empower others to do the same.
Yeah.
So let's talk, because you and I met 2020 or 2021? 2021 it had to be, actually.
I think so. Yeah.
You and I met 2021. You asked me to be a part of your campaign. You are the founder of an organization called Let's Beehive.
Yes.
So let's start here. For people who do not know, tell us who Dr. Andrea Dunn is.
Yes, I am. I feel like I'm a lover first of all things. But for the most part, I'm from Orlando, born and raised right here, and I'm a pharmacist, board certified in pediatrics, and I've been a pediatric pharmacist for almost 15 years now, believe it or not. But I started Let's Beehive just because of things that I saw in clinical practice and the effects of how HIV can affect our youth and how with women and children, more specifically through labor and delivery. And a lot of my research in the very beginning of my undergraduate years was on perinatal transmission. And that was my introduction into HIV and why I got excited and wanted to become a pharmacist because of the treatments. And it was really interesting because U equals U didn't exist back then. But we knew that there was a way that we could prevent transmission from in utero or transmission in utero during pregnancy to the unborn child. And I think, it was just very fascinating for me. And I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like HIV and this type of work kind of found me, believe it or not. But it was during an internship, where I feel like my passion for pharmacy was birthed essentially during that internship at the AIDS Education and Training Center at University of Florida, which is where I got my Bachelor's of Science degree and minored in community health. So from there, I became a tester. I'm probably dating myself, but it's okay. It was like back in 2003. I became a HIV tester and counselor in Alachua County Health Department and fell in love with just the work and, the need in helping everybody in the community and really learning the importance of education as it relates to HIV. And from there, I went on to Howard University, moved to DC, and pursued pharmacy school. And then I really was more excited about the power of treatments and things that they could do as far as, all types of diseases. But HIV had always been one of my favorite disease states to learn about and how the medications work in suppressing the virus. And so I just continued to work through there, moved back to Orlando. This is home. And from there, I just started looking at the statistics and seeing what I saw in clinical practice, which was the same thing, either in Georgia, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., Jacksonville, and all the places where I had lived and practiced. And I moved back home and I'm thinking, look at these statistics, oh my gosh, and just seeing how it affected so many different youth and families. Sometimes I would see a whole family who the parents and the children were both were all living with HIV and just seeing the family dynamics of it. And I just felt, the need to do something to help in the community. Oftentimes education is like the missing piece. Oh, I didn't know is usually one of the first things that people say. And so when generating or creating an idea of Let's Beehive, when I was on Howard's campus was when, I started the concepts of Let's Beehive and developing it into a program in school all those years ago. But it's been exciting. I don't know. Dr. Dunn is an HIV advocate. I love advocacy for women and children. Very family oriented. I'm a mother, soon to be author, and just a lover of all things. I don't know. I'm very happy, very go lucky, and super excited to be here with you on Talk with Koiya.
Yes, I love that you started off with that you are a lover, because I do think that it exudes off of you.
Oh.
Like just being a lover. I was telling you before we started the podcast, you are someone who just has great energy. And a lot of times in working in certain fields, you can be around certain energy for a long time. So when you get someone of your nature that comes through with this bright, bubbly energy, it's like, oh, it's so refreshing, So I do affirm that you are a lover. We'll say that because that really does reek and exude off of you. But you have been connected to purpose very early, I would say, or at least you saw the thing that you wanted to do very early on and identified with it and kind of took a path that aligned with that. So much so you created Let's Beehive. So could you tell us about Let's Beehive and kind of just give us like your specialty and what your organization does?
Yes. Thank you for the compliments and the flowers too. I really appreciate that. And yeah, so Let's Beehive is an acronym. Let's be HIV educated. And with my bachelor's being in health education, it was like a way for me to be able to join all of my loves together for the community with pharmacy, for children. And just, Let's Beehive was a way that we could educate everyone. And I oftentimes felt like sitting in conferences and, as healthcare providers, we're learning all of this information. And, but yet the general public didn't really know or understand this disease state. And it was always like a lack of awareness. And so we created Let's Beehive, essentially to just start with, I thought, just basic education. And then we launched our very first community outreach event in June of 2015, right after we officially were incorporated. And it just kind of picked up from there. But what we basically do is provide HIV education services, awareness and prevention services now, and it's continued to grow over the years. But our main focus is making sure that we incorporate youth and children into these conversations, and that it shouldn't just be for adults. And, right now we have a really big push for PrEP for women, and making sure that, communities that are not most popular, I would say, in the HIV space, or, women and youth are often communities that are very vulnerable, but often underserved. And so I'm super excited, to be able to be here today and share this space with you, and even have another advocate on board who's, just as passionate about women and people in our community as well. So, but basically, we have a lot of collaborations and a lot of partnerships where we provide HIV education in non-traditional spaces is one of our biggest goals. So, we have a lot of bee-themed philosophies or bee-themed programming to go with the brand, and try to make it fun and uplifting, and, even though it's a heavy topic, but make it to where, it can still be education in an uplifting manner. That's all, where it's non-judgmental. And that's one of our core values, I think, with the organization, and making sure that, our motto is that we provide health education, or use health education as a form of natural medicine, and really pulling in some of just the natural components. And I think in the way our world is now, there's such a big push for natural, holistic remedies and treating the whole person. And I think when you look at HIV, especially in our communities, that it's more than just sex. And, so those are some of the things that I feel like we try to connect those dots, or to connect those missing pieces, so that way we can really help organizations or different people or different communities learn the importance of how it's affecting our community, and what can we do to really, really help, but more in a collaborative effort.
Yes, and you mentioned PrEP. One of the ways, or the way that we met in 2021, as I mentioned, was you reached out to me and asked me to be a part of your PrEP for Black Women campaign.
Mm-hmm.
You are a huge advocate for PrEP. Let's talk about what PrEP is for people who may not know.
Yeah, so PrEP is a prevention method. And to be honest with you, we've used PrEP in other disease states. We just never called it PrEP. For example, vaccinations. We take medicine to prevent something from happening before it can happen. So with pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is the acronym for PrEP, it mainly is just prevention. Very similar to what a lot of women know is birth control. I'm not pregnant, don't want to get pregnant, so we take a form of medication to prevent that from happening. It's not 100%, but it is effective. So PrEP can prevent HIV in the same manner, where it's something we take ahead of time before exposure, and it equips our body and protects our CD4 cells in so many words. I don't want to get too technical, but it forms a level of protection for our bodies to be able to prevent HIV from utilizing our own bodies to replicate itself. And so PrEP is still it was approved for men in 2012 for Truvada specifically, but it took a long time for, them to determine why it wasn't initially not successful in women. But
and
now,
I want to talk about that too, because among all PrEP users in the United States, 92% were male, and only 8% were female. And as I mentioned, you are a huge advocate of PrEP, specifically with Black women too. So I guess my question is, why do you think that women aren't taking PrEP? But then specifically, why do you think Black women aren't taking PrEP?
Yes, I think this is a great question. one, the number one reason why I feel like Black women are not taking PrEP is because they don't know about it. They don't know about it. And even though this medication was approved more than 10 years ago, we come across women who've still never heard of it before. Yep. And I think in the very beginning, and it's, nothing to the pharmaceutical companies, but they just didn't do, there weren't enough women involved in the research in the very beginning. So that way they could assess whether or not this medication would be beneficial for women as well. And I think we need to get more women involved in research, which is another area that I'm really interested in helping with as well. But in the very beginning, that was one of the deficiencies with PrEP, is women weren't really on it. They didn't really know, wasn't successful in women once they did start doing the research. And they had to find the nuances or the differences between male and female. And in order to make sure that it was efficacious in women. So it took some time. But I think it's really important for not only to learn about it, but I feel like in our community and even as Black women, there's still a level of mistrust, medical mistrust. I mean, we saw it during COVID.
Yeah.
And I think that it takes time still. So once they even learn about it or may be aware of it, it still takes time for them to digest it and understand. But the marketing in the very beginning was not for women, and it's still very limited among women. So being able to have the opportunity to share that space with you, and, we actually use real women who live here in Orlando, who are part of our community, to be able to show healthcare providers and women in the community and be representative of that. Meant the world to me to be able to have that opportunity, because I think representation does matter, and to be able to have the opportunity to launch it first, I think in Orlando, and second in the state, which I had no idea, that we were second in the state to be able to do that specifically for Black women. But I think it's just really important for us to know that it is for us, healthcare providers to know that it is for us. And another reason why I would say that women are not on it is because they're not being properly screened in healthcare settings. And we need to do a lot more to help our healthcare providers to become comfortable screening and prescribing and monitoring our patients that are on PrEP. So I feel like it's a twofold, it's definitely a dual lack.
And I'm happy you say that. And I'm happy you also bring up the perspective from the health provider side as well, because I actually know a Black woman who is interested in being on PrEP, and her provider told her, no, that's not for you. You don't need that. And that was so interesting, because you have a woman here advocating for herself, telling you like, hey, I subscribe to a certain lifestyle, so I want to be a part of taking this. And you're still telling her no.
Yep.
That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm. Even women who are married are not properly screened for HIV, or being told, no, you don't need that.
Yeah.
When I feel like in today's society and in this lifestyle, there's all different types of lifestyles, and even open marriages and entanglements, as we have experienced through different couples and different relationships. But, everybody does not live a traditional way of life. And I think that we, maybe need to do some more cultural competency trainings with our healthcare providers and helping them, maybe take their personal biases out of how they care for patients. And I think that's what's happening. They're making decisions for their patients without knowing all of the details, which is one of the reasons why the PrEP treatment guidelines changed, and they made it to where anyone who's asking for PrEP should be considered getting on PrEP. And that was a recent change, I think, as of last year to the...
I didn't know that. So for the person or people who are out there who have advocated to be on PrEP to their providers, and they've basically told them no, what are some things that you would tell them to further advocate for themselves to be on PrEP?
Yes. One thing is I would probably recommend and teach them to how to find providers that are PrEP friendly. sometimes it may not be the provider who they've always seen or someone that they may feel the most comfortable with. That I think women or anybody who's interested in getting on PrEP has to go to a place that is PrEP friendly or has providers that are willing to prescribe PrEP. And so that can be found at preplocator.org, which is one of the organizations that I always recommend to clients. But if they're local here in Orlando, because oftentimes we may get messages on social media about where to find, and they may not be here in Orlando. But one of the things that I'm super excited about is I've partnered with Orlando Immunology Center, and I'm actually prescribing PrEP to women now to be a solution to the problem. And we're doing a research project specifically for women, cisgender women, and PrEP. And so I'm excited about that opportunity. It just started this year. And, just the opportunities for pharmacists to work in and do more of the work. And I think if we get more pharmacist involvement in HIV prevention, we can probably solve some of these barriers. So I would recommend, if there isn't anyone who is listening that's local and is a female and is interested in getting on PrEP, to definitely contact me. I can give the phone number. It's 407-999-6017. And that's directly to me, that they can be able to contact me to see if they want to participate in the study. So what we're researching or trying to analyze is we're wanting to know what are women's preferences. So of the two PrEP options available, the injectable and the oral Truvada or injectable Apretude, which one would they prefer and why? Which one works better for their lifestyle and why? And we also want to know, how is it seeing a pharmacist? Do they feel more comfortable being in a community-based setting? Things of that sort. So we're not really assessing the efficacy of the drug in the study because both of them are FDA approved, but we're really trying to figure out, using non-traditional models, if using a community-based PrEP model will be better for women. And then also offering it during non-traditional hours, since most women are caretakers, they're working, that, if they had more flexibility in the times that they can make those appointments, if that's better conducive to their lifestyles. So we're trying to assess a lot of different things, but centering it around women and what will work for them and what they feel most comfortable. And so I'm hoping that so far I've been able to get a few women and prescribe PrEP to a few women in the last couple of months. And so I'm excited about that and monitoring them and just, helping them to feel more comfortable about it. I think women in our space, and even youth and even heterosexual men, PrEP is for them too. It's not just for our LGBTQ plus populations and our brothers and sisters or same gender loving. It's not just for them, PrEP can be used for anyone. So that would be my advice, to find a PrEP friendly provider that will still care for you as an individual, and be flexible, even if it's not the providers that you're most comfortable with. So that way you're not really affected by the stigma that can still be associated with PrEP and the misconceptions that even providers have, because there's stigma in healthcare too. And I have personally experienced things.
Same.
Yeah, where I'm like, no, I'd like HIV test. No, I would like a full STI panel, and having to advocate for yourself. So in the event, I've changed providers several times, but I have a provider now that I feel very, very comfortable with, and I don't really have those challenges anymore. So it may take a few trial and errors, but definitely, I can, that's actually one of the things that we're trying to work on this year, is seeing if we can help provide a list of safe spaces. So I know we have list of PrEP providers, but they don't really provide information as to like what type of providers they are. And then I feel like oftentimes it's just a list. They don't really know much about each one of those organizations. So I'm thankful that our PrEP provider list is growing and we're getting more PrEP providers, but oftentimes people in the community don't know what type of clients, like what type of friendly are these different PrEP provider locations. So that's something that I feel like would be good to enhance the current list that we have so that way people are more aware, whether it's using emojis, icons, like what we use through social media to help people understand which organizations cater to which populations or where they may feel safer at some of those locations.
I really love that because I think one of the things I admire that you do is go and figure out what the problem is in this industry, but then also come back and try to provide the solution. Because a lot of times we see people often identifying the problem, but not coming back with a solution. So you're being the person that points out, oh, there's something wrong here. And it's like, okay, well, do you want to help fix it? Mm-hmm. And you're doing that. And I admire that so much.
No, I love that. I think maybe it's just something that's just in me. I don't know, but I feel like I've always been like that, like a very critical thinker, like problem solver, or like I could see it. And then I've been like this since I was probably, I don't know, a little girl, as long as I can remember that I loved solving problems. So I'm happy you identified that or that it resonates that way.
We need that.
Yes, because that's a goal, to help and just, that's my nature to help as much as I can.
You're such a helper. I can definitely identify that. So much so that back in January, you were the preliminary speaker at the Southern Community-Based Organization Summit. You also taught community-based organizations how to build and nurture non-traditional partnerships to reach Black women and girls to improve HIV prevention efforts. Pretty much what I just said. You saw the problem and also met with the solution. I want to hear all about this because there isn't often a focus on women and girls. And I love so much that we have a Black woman attacking that whole field. So tell me all about you speaking at CBO Summit. And then also talk to me about the helping people bridge the gap of meeting women and girls and just making sure that's effective in the HIV space.
Yes. I love the conference or the summit, the Southern CBO Summit by NASTAD. And so the plenary was, oh my gosh, it was really good. I was excited to be there. It was a 3-day summit specifically for leaders of community-based organizations. And there were several sessions on like capacity building and what we can do to better reach our community and different targeted populations. And so it was in San Antonio, Texas, and it was amazing. I think it was a very good experience. And even while I was there, my thought process was, oh, I wonder what organizations focus on Black women. Naturally, I was like, oh, what are the statistics for Black women here? What orgs focus on doing HIV work? So I loved being in a different geographical region to see if some of their challenges are the same what we see here in Orlando, which I could say that there were some similarities too, just as far as not as many advocates who were doing the work specifically for that targeted population. But NASTAD is doing some really, really great things. I think this was their second year that they hosted this summit. And it was very small, like a small group, maybe about 100 people. It was very intimate. We did a lot of workshops and like activities to figure out, actually create plans while we were there. So the sessions were very, very engaging. And we learned a lot from a lot of other leaders as well. So I had an opportunity to talk about nurturing non-traditional spaces. And so I actually recorded a podcast for their Southern Steep podcast. And that's where I think after recording that podcast, they knew that the summit was coming, that I was invited to come to the summit to specifically talk about nurturing non-traditional partnerships specifically for women and girls. So I was super excited to be able to help them and to share with the community-based organizations who were in attendance. But I think when caring specifically for this population and focusing on prevention for women, some of the things that I shared at the summit was just to make sure that there has to be a level of flexibility, I think, in when you're working with women, because like I mentioned earlier, women have so much on our plates. We're multitasking so many different things, and oftentimes our health can kind of fall at the bottom of the totem pole. So the more activities and the more priorities that are going on, that we have to figure out a way to make things time efficient, convenient, for women, and also to make sure that is more inclusive in care. I think oftentimes a lot of community-based organizations, we often work in silos, but in order to reach women in different places, we have to go where they are. And, so not only, just distributing condoms or a pamphlet, that oftentimes that we have to work hard to continue to reiterate some of the same concepts over and over, because it may take 5 or 6 times in order for them to actually get the concept of what we're trying to get them to learn. So it takes multiple times for you to be with them. So for one partnership, for example, that I thought was very good, or working in a non-traditional space, was we had opportunities, and we're in the process now of developing education schedules so we could educate women in corrections and work with women who may be sex workers, and women who, even through human trafficking, even though it's like a very non-traditional space, it's a very hard space to tap into, to get in, because it takes a level of trust. And I think dealing with women, and how can we really create spaces of trust first before we can even get to anything related to education. And it takes multiple times, I feel like, in order to really reach women in different ways. But that was one non-traditional space. And then even working with daycares and different partnerships. So we've been able to develop, I would say, more than 50 partnerships with different businesses throughout the Orlando area that support our mission and allow us to train their staff that essentially will help spread the word in those different community-based settings. And a lot has just been by word of mouth. But I feel like if you can get in non-traditional spaces and help educate women in a very subtle way, that it will continue to grow. But you just have to be patient, be flexible, and not push the issue so much, I feel like, with sex or HIV, because it's a holistic approach. And so if we can reach women, I think, in just general lifestyle, everyday living, I know, like, for example, our billboard was right over flyers, right? Do you know how many people go to flyers locally here and was so excited to see us, and word of mouth travels, and I think that the representation and seeing people really helped, and it helps to establish that comfort. But I was very excited that it was in, at least the printed billboards were in very prominent high traffic areas where, people could see that PrEP is for them. So I think that oftentimes as well with how to reach women, I would really, and I encouraged a lot of the organizations at the CBO Summit to consider, I know faith-based can be a very hard, I feel like, area to get into, but there are a lot of pastors and faith leaders who are interested in helping, even if it's among people who live different, lifestyles that may not be non-traditional. But there are a lot of pastors and faith leaders and people in ministry that do have a heart and want to help just as much. And so I would encourage community-based organizations to make sure that, they try to work on building faith-based partnerships as well, because a lot of people rely on faith in hard times, or they'll go to church in hard times. And so we need to make sure that our pastors are equipped to be able to handle that and reduce stigma even in those environments. And so, and even if it's abstinence only education through vow of purity, it's okay. Like, just being flexible and working with organizations to see what their comfort level is. And even if it's something starting small, that it'll eventually continue to grow. But those are some of the things we had talked about on the podcast. It actually just aired, I think, 2 days ago. So if anyone's listening or wants to hear a little bit more, because some of the things I've mentioned on the podcast are things that I talked about too at the summit. And I think it was very well received by the organizations. I actually met another young lady there who was focused, and it was only one in the room, who was predominantly focused on increasing HIV prevention services and support services for either women living with HIV or for prevention. And she had actually invited me to a support group they were having the next day, but
Wow.
I couldn't attend. But she had shared with me some of their collaborative efforts that they've worked on as a state, which I felt is very different than what we do here. Specifically for women. It wasn't just Black women, but for women in general throughout the state. And that collaborative piece, I felt was so important for them to be able to have a better reach of reaching different women, even if they were in different cities within the state, But it was really good. It was really good. And I can't wait to be able to go back again, because I'll probably go again next year and continue to, promote it. But I think all community-based leaders should consider going. And in addition to, a lot of other conferences that happen throughout the year.
There are a lot. And I don't think I realized that until I actually got into this field. I'm like, whoa, wait, that's how many go on a year?
Yeah.
Yeah. March 10th is National Women and Girls HIV and AIDS Awareness Day. Tell us the significance, or even why it is important to have a whole entire day dedicated to something like this.
I think it's so important because women are often left out of the conversation. And even out of like how we're talking about studies and I just feel like they're a priority population, but not other people's top priority. And so having a specific day dedicated to HIV awareness, specifically for women and girls, is vital. I feel like in ending the HIV epidemic and making sure that all populations are included in that. And, women need their space. I think it's an opportunity for, each year we host our Queen Bee HIV Awareness Symposium in March, and we're actually hosting it this year on March 10th. It's a Sunday this year, but we'll be hosting it as well. And it's so important. I think it's an opportunity where I feel like girls always want to find an opportunity to get together and like do things, and where we can kind of just like be ourselves uninhibited. And I think we need that. We need that space, and in order to really reach women and even our teenage girls. Oh my gosh. It is so important. It is so important to make sure that they're included.
They are who I think about first when, a day like this is thought about, it because it acknowledges the unique challenges women and young girls face in terms of prevention, diagnosis, access to care. Women and girls make up more than half of the population, 38.4 million. That's a lot of people. So what unique challenges do women and girls face specifically when it comes to preventing HIV?
That's a loaded question, but I would say oftentimes women and even our teenage girls feel like they don't have the ability to have control over whether or not a man or their partner is going to love them with boundaries. And oftentimes I feel like women may subject themselves, or females may subject themselves to different things in order to not be alone. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm placing blame, but I think that there's some identities I think that we need to focus on as far as loving ourselves first enough. But I think there is some level of control that and fear, that if we don't have sex, no one's going to like us. We live in such a sex-crazed and hypersexual world, and women are sexualized for our bodies, what we look like, how many curves, and a lot of our youth are growing up with social media, which I love. Technology is great, but the images of like perfection and body image is so hard right now that, they say sex sells, and it does, but it's also sending a message that that's all, I guess, like a woman is worth. And we're worth so much more than that. Our bodies are just one piece of the puzzle. And oftentimes I think those are things that interfere with prevention efforts, or being able to feel comfortable enough to speak up with things that we may not like, and not subjecting ourselves to the things that our partners want. Because I feel like women are often pleasers too, right? We're nurturers. We're here for others, almost is like kind of how I feel like we're raised, and things that we think of, and it's not really for pleasure. Like, we're here to please other people. And those are, I think, some of the mental or psychological contributing factors that interfere with prevention for women, because we're thinking of so many other people before ourselves. I would also say, this is a really good question. It's loaded too, but I think that women need a space to know that it is okay to be different sometimes. And not only is it just like a lack of education, lack of awareness, the medical mistrust, that comes into play, but there's also a level of perception too, right? Because how can we have an interest to protect ourselves from something that we're unaware that we need protection from? And one year for our Queen Bee event, the theme was Mask Off, to help with perception. And that was the whole theme that year, of helping women better identify or perceive our own vulnerabilities based on things that we may partake in, or activities that we may do, or things that we like or things we don't like. It's just, how can we create better ways to identify those things? And so I actually talk about this in the book that I'm currently writing. She is Prepalicious, and it's a 7-step guide for women and girls of color to learn how to live a lifestyle of prevention before transmission. And I think it's so important that it's a real thing for people to be able to know and understand and realize that we do have the power to prevent this before it can happen. But if they're unaware of the statistics, unaware of transmission and new diagnoses in our local area, they may not understand the importance of prevention because of the lack of awareness. And so I think it's, different. They're different factors, but I think mentally as well, there's things that I feel like in music, no condoms. Some people say use condoms, but it seems like there's more of a consensus of not using them. And that's one of the I wouldn't say the easiest ways for prevention, but some things that can be a small intervention that can make a big impact if we were to utilize them more. But, depending upon the relationship and whether or not there's a part that I talk about in the book, how oftentimes we feel that time is protection. But if you're using condoms over a period of time and there's like it's okay, it gives us almost like a false sense of security that it's okay, even if we've been with this partner, we're okay. But you've been using condoms the whole entire time, and it gives you a false sense of security. And when you remove the condom, but time is not really protection. And oftentimes I feel like women may feel that because they're monogamous, and it's not a slight against men either, because I love our Black men. But oftentimes you feel like because you're okay, you get tested, that you assume that your partner is okay. And I think there's just those type of examples or levels of trust that is there, and like sometimes can create a false sense of trust when that doesn't really give you the full answer. And oftentimes in the community, even men have said, well, no, my girl gets tested, she's good, I'm good. That is the wrong mentality, but it has become almost like a social norm but that doesn't necessarily mean that the other person is okay. When we have great immune systems, some people have different types of levels of immune systems, but, someone can be unaware that they're living with HIV and can be unknowingly transmitting HIV to people because they are unaware of their own status. And so this perception part that I feel like we have to really work hard on within the community to help people understand HIV can happen to anyone, and but it can also be prevented too. And if we have the right toolbox, just like with your spend the night bag and, different tools, if we start to integrate it and make it a priority, and empower women that they can carry condoms too.
Yes.
It's not just the onus on the man all the time. That, in our sister to sister classes, we teach women how to use condoms. We use real toys and they practice on them. And I think it's important, for them to know different levels of prevention and actually develop a plan that works for them in their lifestyle, and be okay to change that plan as their sexual plan and lifestyles change too. And so the guide that I'm working on is really to not just be like a one-time book, but just something that they can refer to time and time again, even if the plan changes at different times.
That's beautiful. I think something like that is so needed. I know you're a mom. How old is your son?
He's 9.5.
He's 9. Okay, so not quite as old as my little brother. He's 16, so he's in high school. And this statistic scares the living crap out of me because he is a high schooler. Nearly 46% of sexually active high schoolers did not use a condom the last time they had sex. When I tell you, that makes me cringe. Like, that makes me cringe so bad. Help us with some tools, tactics, materials that we can use to help have transparent conversations with young adults about condoms and using them.
This is really interesting to me because some people have said, and this is just me quoting what I come in contact with people in the community, and they're like, and even young adults and youth, condoms don't work. There's this myth that they don't work, or that they hurt, or it's not natural. It's
uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, all of those different things. But I think that oftentimes people may not realize there's different condoms for different things. And so even just being educated on the different types of condoms, there's thinner condoms, that may not be, for example, skins are more made to be more realistic, right? Even using female condoms where the male is considered free without, latex wrapped around their genital parts. But I think that they have to be exposed to different types and just know that there's not just one, and then learn, what type of lubricants to use and what liquids and substances not to use, how to properly store them so they don't break and pop, and how to properly use them for different things, even for oral sex, right? When we ask sometimes in the community, if they use condoms for oral sex and that there's flavored condoms, and they're like, oh, really? We didn't know that. Why? Why would you need a flavored condom? And making sure that they know not to put flavored condoms in other areas that aren't used for oral sex, right? It's just some things that I think in the industry, things that we feel that we may take for granted and think that it's just obvious that other people may need to know. But I think, as far as encouragement for young adults, especially for people who may not be interested in taking birth control, I like to let people know it's more than just preventing pregnancy. And I really hope that we start to see more people probably also on birth control and PrEP, or whether it's PrEP and condoms, or, using layered levels of protection is what I'm really, really hoping that we'll start to see. And condoms may not be for everybody. And that's fine, but are you getting tested with your partner? Do you feel comfortable, if you do have an open relationship, how are you handling that? And I think that with everything being so readily available on social media and on the internet, and people can Google whatever they want, watch porn all day if they want to, they're not using condoms in these things that people are visually seeing. And I think they may have opportunities to reenact some of the things that they're watching and think that that's what the sense of normalcy is. Condoms just aren't really praised. I think there's such a negative connotation towards condoms that people just don't want to use them. And that's fine. But what other measures are you taking in place to still use in your prevention toolbox? And so that's what I would encourage people to find out. Why don't they like using condoms? If it doesn't feel natural, did they try, different ones? If for a female, maybe using a ribbed condom with your partner instead of a plain condom, so that way there's different levels of stimulation. And I think we just kind of have to get over this fear, even though I feel like, we cringe and we don't want them to experience these different things in life. I think that, sex is a normal part of life. And I do think we do need to wait. I think 16 is very early. And I would tell my son the same thing. I would probably start educating him around 11, 12 when his body starts changing. But I want him to be very well versed on understanding his body, understanding that these hormones and feelings that we all have felt at some point in time and still do, that it's normal. It's a natural way. We all are here because someone had sex and someone, it's a part of the evolution of life. And I think that it's hard, and it's very hard for families. It's very hard for parents. It's very hard, I think, on even the youth who are feeling these things. They have no one to talk to. What do they do? So they talk to their friends. It's like the same way we probably did, right? But I think it's really important to make sure that they have a trusted resource. And Google is not always the best, or whether or not they're friends who they're learning from. And that's something that I feel like with Let's Beehive that we try to offer as well. I've counseled several kids of families that have reached out to ask, can you talk to my child about XYZ? Sure, but it's a trusted, unbiased environment. It's a learning environment. So they may not be able to have the ability to do it themselves, but reaching out to services and organizations that can provide the education to them, I think parents and even families have to get into a space where it's okay if they can't do it, but they still need to learn about it. So that way, studies and statistics has shown that youth who are educated actually make better choices and decisions when they're adults. And so in order to really, I think, make changes to this, we have to get to a point to where we're learning to embrace sex a little bit more. And I'm not saying like embrace it as far as activities, doing it. I'm saying just embrace the fact that learning the information and how it works and what to do, what not to do, and giving them the freedom to learn how to make those choices. And they may bump their heads a few times, but it's important for young adults to know that condoms do work. They work against prevention, HIV, pregnancy, and other STDs. Not every STD, but they work, up to 85% efficacy or higher, depending upon if you use them and they're stored properly and all these other things that we talked about. But condoms do work. And just personally, for a long time, I always used condoms. And I didn't, have a baby early or things like that. I, didn't experience any STDs. And I think that if people actually really shared some of their personal experiences and maybe not kept so much secret, because at the end of the day, they're still going to be inquisitive. They're still going to want to learn, and they'll still probably experience it on their own one day. But, did we equip them enough to help them learn how to try to make the right decisions, the best way that they can? But sometimes I feel like in the society we live in now, not knowing is more detrimental than them actually participating in the act.
I agree. And with that being said, could you give us 5 strategies to help our listeners and viewers protect themselves from HIV?
Yes. I know people don't want to talk about it, but abstaining and being celibate is a great thing. That's the number one way that I always let people know. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, there's been a period of times where I've gone years with no intimacy, and that's probably TMI, but
but someone needs to hear that.
It is
so that
important.
They know.
Yeah, it's okay to be, in between partners, relationships, and I think sometimes we have to learn how to be okay being by ourselves, and I think that takes growth and maturity. But oftentimes we kind of go just from relationship to relationship and dating, and we don't really give ourselves a chance to just probably heal from the previous relationship or not rebound too quickly. But definitely abstinence, celibacy is 100%, with the exception of intravenous drug use or sharing needles. And so I would say that would be the second way of reducing the spread of HIV. So not clean needle, but syringe exchange programs. So clean is a stigmatizing word, so that's why I had to correct myself there. But the syringe needle exchange programs have drastically helped reduce the spread of HIV. So for individuals who may be suffering from drug addictions, PrEP can help prevent as well up to 74% in intravenous drug use, but also needle exchange. So like how we talked about the layered levels of prevention. So if you had needle exchange and PrEP on board, the likelihood of someone contracting HIV is very, very minimal with those 2 prevention methods on board. So that would be the second way. Number 3, we talked about condoms already before. And so condoms, they're great. They are effective. I gave the percentage up to 85%. Now, some of it may vary for pregnancy and some of the other STDs, but for the most part, about 85% efficacious if used appropriately. Condoms. And then I would say treatment as prevention. That's like, oh my God, one of the reasons why I feel like I love being a pharmacist, because of the treatment. Mm-hmm. And treatments are helping prolong life of individuals who are living with HIV. So as I mentioned earlier, we knew a long time ago, I feel that U equals U existed, because for years they've been able to reduce the rates of HIV transmission during pregnancy to unborn children in utero. We just didn't call it U equals U, but we knew the power of the treatments were working. And so treatment as prevention is still a form of prevention for individuals who are living with HIV. And so I just really like to stress the importance of, people staying in care, and they can live healthy lives. And but it's challenging if care or treatment stops. Then HIV has the ability to take over the immune system again. So I do want to make a note that staying in care is what makes that difference. But without treatment, it's going to be very hard for them to continue to live, or individuals who are living with HIV. But treatment as prevention, and then PEP and PrEP. Yeah, those are probably the last two. So PrEP is treatments before exposures, and then PEP would be, I guess, more analogous to Plan B for what everybody is familiar with. But, after a potential exposure, what can we do to prevent PEP? And so the sooner you start PEP.
And what is the window that they have?
Yes, PEP is up to 72 hours. But, and this is where it gets really tricky too, because oftentimes I'm like, we get questions if it's after 72 hours, will it still be effective? And the answer is it loses its efficacious or its efficacy after that 72-hour mark. And so it's not really guaranteed that PrEP will work, and it's not recommended after that time. PEP, it's not recommended that it's started after 72 hours. But I've seen rare instances where they will start it, but it's not as efficacious, and it probably will not work. And so I think it's really important to know that if there is a potential exposure, that the sooner you can get on post-exposure prophylaxis, that it is efficacious. And so I feel like in occupation, there's non-occupation and occupational exposure. But in hospital settings, for example, I've worked with physicians who've had needle sticks and have been on PEP after a potential exposure.
Wow.
And nurses and just people in healthcare. So I feel like in a hospital setting, this is the part where I feel like, why is this so common for us on this side of the table, but yet the general public doesn't know enough about PEP, right? So if there is a potential exposure or the condom breaks and your partner's status, that PEP is also an option, and it is effective. 70 to 80, I'll probably just do a range, depending upon when it starts, as far as when the medication is resumed. But you have to take PEP every day for 28 days. So it's a full cocktail regimen, and it works very well. I've seen a lot of our hospital staff members at various hospitals all over that have used it and have been okay.
Good for them.
But it's not only for people who work in hospitals or phlebotomists or people who are around blood and labs and things like that, but non-occupation. So there's lists, and we have providers that do PEP as well. And so I would really encourage listeners to make sure that they're aware, because even in instances, and I talk about a lot of this too in the book, but for individuals who may be rape victims or sexual assault, it's really important that they are aware that PEP is an option. So they may not know if their assailant is positive. They may not know their status, but in an emergency department setting, I think it's very important to make sure that if there are concerns about HIV, to speak to their providers about it, really inquire for it, ask for it. If they don't do it, then be aware of who your PEP providers are in your local area. So that way they can try to get it as soon as possible. And it depends. If it's the weekend, these non-traditional hours, what do people do when they come to the emergency department and they need help? It's truly an emergency. And I think that other people may not view it as an emergency, even though they're aware of the time constraint. But PEP is definitely in PrEP. I kind of always categorize them together, even though they're like before and after.
But it's a great way to just help people remember. So I, too, do the same thing. It's like, well, if I'm going to tell you about this, I should tell you about this as well. You have helped make this this episode so impactful. If people wanted to check out your podcast or find out more about Dr. Dunn and also Let's Beehive, where could they contact you? Give us all of your social media. Tell us where they can find and check out the podcast. And then also tell us about the Sister to Sister program.
Yes. So we are on all social media platforms as Let's Beehive at LETSBEEHIVE. Our website is www.letsbeehive.org. And as I mentioned, for the prep study, if anyone is interested, they can call or text 407-999-6017. And we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or X. And I think that's pretty much it. Our Sister to Sister HIV prevention program or classes that we do. It's really, we've taught even basketball teams of guys using our Sister to Sister classes. So we will teach anyone. We've had fathers bring their daughters and they learn together.
Wow.
We're very family oriented, I feel like, at Let's Beehive, where we want to make sure that we've had people who wanted to do their 16th birthdays with a group. Like you mentioned, your brother, 16.
Wow.
16 birthdays where we're talking about sex. And they had like a little, like almost, I wouldn't say a sex birthday party, but a sex education birthday. And their friends learned together. So I feel like those are some of those like abstract, non-traditional things that we do. But we've had Sister to Sister in a lot of fun different ways. We work with groups of wives and, did adult toy learning in conjunction with that. And they seem like they really, really like that. But it's basically a class where we help improve condom negotiation skills. We teach about condoms, help women or attendees learn about self-love and just the importance of PEP, what to do, how it works. And we do some role playing and like fun activities. We'd usually have food, but we have our age range that we try to target is at least 13. So there's a Sister to Sister for teens and a Sister to Sister for women or adults. Wow. And it's been really, really good. I remember one participant, it blew my mind, and I think she said she was in her 40s. That was the first time she had ever learned how to use a condom and like learn all the things about condoms in her 40s. Yeah. Wow. So I think it's so important for all age groups, but as young as 13 and as high as 65, we will educate you. And so
that is so exciting. And I know the podcast too, we'll make sure that it's linked below in the description box so that people can check it out. But thank you so much, like I said, for help making this episode impactful. Yeah. As you know, March in our field is pretty much always dedicated to women and girls because that is the day, March 10th, that it falls on. So I just wanted to make sure that we could touch on this, but also I wanted to make sure I called the perfect person to help me execute this episode in the way in which I needed to. And I think you over-exceeded that for me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, Koiya. Anytime you need me, I'm here. And I love it. I love everything you're doing. And I'm happy that we're able to share this space together again. Yay. And, really show that collaborative effort, right? And so I love it. And thank you so much.
You're very welcome.